The blood on her dress was still wet when Mason Bryant found her crying by Cornet Creek, her shoulders shaking so hard he thought she might break apart right there on the muddy bank. It was late summer in 1878, and the Colorado sky hung heavy with storm clouds that had been threatening rain for 3 days without delivering. Mason had been tracking a stolen mare through the mountains above Telluride when he heard the sound, a kind of keening that made his chest tighten in a way he had not felt since the war. He dismounted slowly, careful not to startle whoever was making that awful noise, and tied his horse to a scrub pine before making his way down the rocky slope. She was younger than he expected, maybe 22 or 23, with dark honey-colored hair that had come loose from its pins and hung in tangles around a face blotched red from weeping. Her dress had once been nice, he could tell, the kind of thing a woman wore to church or to meet someone important, but now it was torn at the shoulder and stained with what he knew for certain was blood. Not much of it, but enough to make his hand move instinctively to the colt at his hip. "Madam," he said quietly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Are you hurt?" She looked up at him with eyes the color of creek water in spring, wide and glazed with shock. For a moment she just stared, as if she could not quite understand what she was seeing, and then her face crumpled again and she turned away, pressing her hands to her mouth to stifle the sobs. Mason came closer, dropping to his haunches beside her. He was 31 years old and had seen more than his share of grief, enough to know when someone was drowning in it. "Hey now," he said, his voice gentler than most people who knew him would have believed possible. "Whatever happened, whatever put you here, you don't have to face it alone. Your tears end here with me." She looked at him again, and this time something flickered in her expression, some tiny spark of hope or maybe just desperation. "You do not understand," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, raw from crying. "You cannot help me, no one can." "Try me," Mason said. She drew a shuddering breath, wiping at her face with trembling hands. "My name is Hannah Porter. I came to Telluride 3 months ago to marry a man I met through letters, Samuel Whitmore." He seemed kind in his words, educated, promising. "But when I arrived, when I finally saw him for who he truly was—" She broke off, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "He is cruel, vicious. And tonight he killed a man in front of me, shot him down in cold blood over a card game, and when I tried to leave, tried to run, he told me if I went to the marshal I would be next. He told me I belonged to him now." Mason felt something cold settle in his gut. He knew Samuel Whitmore by reputation, a gambler and a bully who had come to Telluride 6 months back with money from somewhere back east. The man had bought himself a saloon and a house and had been throwing his weight around ever since, but Mason had not heard about any killing. "When did this happen?" "An hour ago. Maybe 2. I waited until he was drinking with his friends and then I ran. I did not know where to go, did not know anyone in this town who would stand against him, so I just kept running until I could not run anymore." She looked down at her hands, at the blood on her dress. "This is from the man he killed, Thomas Garrett. He was just a drifter passing through, did not even do anything wrong. Samuel accused him of cheating and shot him before anyone could stop it." Mason stood up, his jaw tight. He knew what he should do, what the law would say to do. Take her to Marshal Davies, let the law handle it. But he also knew that Davies was old and tired and more interested in keeping the peace than in making trouble for men like Whitmore who had money and influence. Hannah Porter would be lucky if the marshal even believed her, let alone protected her. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. "I have got a camp about a mile from here, hidden up in the rocks. You will be safe there while we figure this out." She hesitated, looking at his hand as if it might be a trap. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Because leaving you here is not an option," Mason said simply. And because I have got a sister about your age, and if she was in trouble like this, I would hope some fool cowboy would step up and do the right thing. Something in his words must have reached her, because she took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. She swayed a little, unsteady, and he caught her elbow to keep her from falling. When did you last eat? I do not remember. This morning, maybe. He whistled low, and his horse picked its way down the slope toward them. We will fix that. Can you ride? Yes, she said, though her voice was uncertain. Mason swung up into the saddle and then reached down to pull her up behind him. She settled against his back, her arms wrapping tentatively around his waist, and he tried not to think about how right it felt to have her there. He had spent the last 8 years keeping his distance from women, from anything that might tie him down or make him vulnerable, but something about Hannah Porter had already gotten under his skin. The ride to his camp was quiet except for the creek rushing beside them and the occasional call of a night bird. Mason could feel Hannah trembling against him, the shock starting to wear off and leave exhaustion in its wake. When they reached the small clearing where he had set up his bedroll and fire ring, he dismounted and helped her down, steadying her when she stumbled. Sit, he said, pointing to a flat rock near where the fire would be. I will get some food going. She sat without argument, folding in on herself like a flower closing at dusk. Mason worked quickly, building a fire and setting a pot of coffee to boil while he fried up some bacon and beans. It was not fancy, but it was hot and filling, and when he handed her a tin plate she took it with both hands and ate like she had not seen food in days. Slow down, he said gently. You will make yourself sick. She nodded but kept eating, and he poured her a cup of coffee that she wrapped her hands around like it was the most precious thing in the world. When she finally finished, some color had come back into her face, and the wild look in her eyes had calmed a little. Thank you, she said quietly. I do not know how I can ever repay you for this kindness. You do not need to repay anything, Mason said. He poured himself coffee and sat down across from her, the fire crackling between them. What you need to do is tell me everything that happened tonight, every detail you can remember. If we are going to keep you safe and get justice for Thomas Garrett, I need to know what we are up against. Hannah took a deep breath and started talking. The story came out slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. She told him about coming to Telluride full of hope, about how Samuel Whitmore had seemed so different in his letters than he was in person. How he had changed the moment she arrived, becoming possessive and controlling, dictating where she could go and who she could talk to. How she had realized within a week that she had made a terrible mistake, but had no money to leave and no family to return to. My parents died of fever 2 years ago, she said, staring into the fire. I have got no siblings, no relatives who would take me in. Samuel knew that. I think that is why he chose me. He wanted someone who had no one, who would be easy to control. Mason felt anger building in his chest, hot and fierce. He had known men like Whitmore during the war, men who took pleasure in having power over others, who saw kindness as weakness and compassion as something to exploit. Tell me about tonight, he said. Hannah's hands tightened on her coffee cup. There was a card game at Samuel's saloon. High stakes with some miners who had just struck silver up in the mountains. Thomas Garrett was one of them. I was serving drinks because Samuel likes to show me off, I suppose, to prove he owned something pretty. Her voice turned bitter. Thomas was winning and Samuel was losing badly. I could see him getting angry the way his face gets red and his hands start shaking. Then Samuel accused Thomas of hiding cards up his sleeve. Was he? Mason asked. No, I was standing right there. Thomas was just lucky, or maybe Samuel was unlucky. Either way, Thomas tried to leave, said he did not want trouble, and Samuel pulled his gun and shot him in the chest. Just like that. No warning, no hesitation. Hannah's voice broke. Thomas looked so surprised. He fell backward and there was blood everywhere, and all Samuel did was laugh and tell the other men to drag the body out back. What about the others? The witnesses? Scared, paid off. Some of both, probably. Samuel has got half the town in his pocket, and the other half is too frightened to stand against him. She looked up at Mason, her eyes desperate. That is why I knew I could not go to the marshal. Samuel owns him too, or might as well. I would be dead before morning. Mason was quiet for a long moment, thinking. She was right about the marshal, he knew that much. Davies would not go against Whitmore without solid proof and multiple witnesses willing to testify, and even then it would be a fight. But letting Whitmore get away with murder was not an option Mason could live with. "Here is what we are going to do," he said finally. "Tomorrow morning, I am going to ride into town and have a conversation with a few people I trust. There are men in Telluride who are not afraid of Samuel Whitmore, men who have been waiting for a reason to take him down. You are going to stay here, hidden until I get back. Then we will figure out our next move." "You would do that for me?" Hannah asked, her voice small. "Risk yourself for a stranger." "You are not a stranger anymore," Mason said, and meant it. "And besides, I have never been good at walking away from a fight, especially when the right side is this clear." She smiled then, just a little, but it was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face completely. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Mason Bryant." "Probably both," he admitted, and was rewarded with a quiet laugh. They talked late into the night, the conversation drifting from the danger they faced to easier things. Mason told her about growing up on a ranch in Wyoming, about his sister Mary who had married a schoolteacher and moved to Denver, about the years he had spent drifting after the war trying to outrun ghosts that would not leave him alone. Hannah told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her mother who had taught her to read and her father who had been a carpenter, about the books she loved and the dream she had once had of becoming a teacher herself. "Maybe you still can," Mason said. "Once this is over, once you are free of Whitmore, you could do anything you want." "I do not even know what I want anymore," Hannah admitted. 3 months ago I thought I wanted security, a home, someone to build a life with. Now I just want to feel safe again." "You are safe," Mason said firmly. "I promise you that. As long as I am breathing, Samuel Whitmore will not lay another hand on you." She looked at him across the fire, and something passed between them, some understanding that went deeper than words. "I believe you," she said quietly. When the fire finally burned down to embers, Mason gave Hannah his bedroll and took a blanket for himself, settling down on the other side of the clearing. He could hear her breathing eventually even out into sleep, but he stayed awake, watching the stars wheel overhead and thinking about the violence that seemed to follow him no matter how far he ran. He woke before dawn to find Hannah still asleep, curled on her side with one hand tucked under her cheek. In the pale morning light she looked younger, more vulnerable, and Mason felt something shift in his chest, some protective instinct he had thought the war had burned out of him. He banked the fire and saddled his horse quietly, leaving Hannah a canteen of water and the rest of his food supplies where she would find them when she woke. The ride into Telluride took less than an hour. The town was just starting to wake up, smoke rising from chimneys and the first miners heading up the mountain trails. Mason rode straight to the livery stable, where he found Jack Freeman already at work mucking out stalls. Jack was an old friend from the war, a man who had saved Mason's life at Shiloh and never once asked for anything in return. He looked up when Mason dismounted, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Well, hell, Bryant, thought you were up in the high country chasing that stolen mare." "I was." Found something more important. Mason lowered his voice. I need your help, Jack, and I need you to keep quiet about it. The grin faded, replaced by sharp attention. What kind of trouble are we talking about? The killing kind. Samuel Whitmore shot a man named Thomas Garrett last night over a card game. I've got a witness, but she is scared and with good reason. Whitmore threatened to kill her if she talks. Jack's expression hardened. Whitmore, I have been waiting for that son of a bitch to step too far. Who is the witness? A woman named Hannah Porter. She came here to marry Whitmore, but he turned out to be something other than what he promised. She saw the whole thing. And you believe her? I do, Mason said without hesitation. There is blood on her dress that backs up her story, and she has got no reason to lie. She is terrified, Jack. Ran all the way out to Cornet Creek before I found her. Jack was quiet for a moment, chewing on the inside of his cheek. You know Davies will not do anything. Whitmore pays him too well. I know. That is why I am thinking we need to go around him. There are territorial marshals in Denver who would care about a murder, especially if we can get them solid evidence. Evidence that Whitmore will destroy the moment he gets wind of what we are doing, Jack pointed out. We would need to move fast. I know. That is why I need help. Is Charlie still in town? Last I heard. He is working security up at the Silver Bell mine. Charlie Stone was another war friend, a man who had been a scout and was better at tracking than anyone Mason had ever met. If anyone could help them gather evidence without Whitmore knowing, it was Charlie. Can you get him? Tell him to meet us at my camp tonight. And Jack, be careful. Whitmore has got eyes everywhere. I always am, Jack said. He clapped Mason on the shoulder. You are doing the right thing, standing up for this girl. Takes guts, especially against a man like Whitmore. She deserves someone to stand up for her, Mason said simply. She has been alone too long. He spent the rest of the morning gathering supplies, careful to act like nothing was wrong. He bought food and ammunition, replaced his worn rope, and even stopped by the saloon for a drink so it would not look suspicious that he had come to town. Samuel Whitmore was there, holding court at his usual table, and Mason had to force himself to stay calm, to not react when he saw the man laughing with his friends like he had not murdered someone the night before. Whitmore was a big man, running to fat but still strong, with cold gray eyes and a mouth that always seemed to be twisted in a sneer. He wore expensive clothes and carried a pearl-handled revolver that he was too quick to draw. Mason watched him from the corner of his eye, memorizing details, filing away information that might be useful later. On his way out of town, Mason made a detour past the alley behind Whitmore's saloon. There were drag marks in the dirt and a dark stain that could have been blood. He filed that away too, then rode back up into the mountains before anyone could ask questions. Hannah was awake when he returned, sitting by the fire with her knees drawn up to her chest. She looked up when she heard his horse, relief flooding her face. I was worried you would not come back. I told you I would, Mason said, swinging down from the saddle. Found some friends who are willing to help. They will be here tonight and we will make a plan. What kind of plan? The kind that gets you out of danger and gets Whitmore what he deserves, Mason said. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I am not going to lie to you, Hannah. This is going to be dangerous. Whitmore is not going to go down easy and we will have to be smart about how we do this. But I swear to you, we will find a way. She was quiet for a moment, her gaze on the fire. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. You could have just pointed me toward the next town and washed your hands of the whole thing. Instead, you are risking your life for someone you met yesterday. Mason thought about the question, about all the reasons he could give. Because it was the right thing to do, because Whitmore needed to be stopped, because the law was failing and someone had to step up. But the truth, the real truth, was simpler and more complicated than any of that. Because when I saw you crying by that creek, something in me woke up that I thought was dead," he said quietly. "I have spent 8 years trying not to care about anything or anyone, trying to keep moving so the past could not catch up with me. But you made me remember what it feels like to want to protect something, to fight for something that matters. And the thought of Whitmore hurting you or anyone else makes me angrier than I have been in a long time." Hannah turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. "You are a good man, Mason Bryant, better than you know." "I am just a man trying to do right," Mason said. "Nothing more, nothing less." "That is more than most people can say," Hannah replied, and then, so softly he almost missed it, "Thank you for seeing me, for caring." He wanted to reach out and take her hand, wanted to tell her that she was easy to see, easy to care about, but the sound of horses approaching made him stand up and reach for his gun instead. He relaxed when he recognized Jack's whistle, the old cavalry signal they had used during the war. Jack and Charlie rode into the clearing together, both of them eyeing Hannah with curiosity. Charlie was a lean man with native blood in his family tree, sharp-eyed and quiet in the way of someone who had spent more time in the wilderness than in towns. He dismounted first, nodding to Mason. "Jack filled me in. You got yourself into something complicated, Bryant." "When do I not?" Mason said dryly. "Hannah, this is Jack Freeman and Charlie Stone. They are going to help us." Hannah stood up, smoothing her ruined dress self-consciously. "Thank you both for coming. I know this is asking a lot. Any enemy of Samuel Whitmore's is a friend of mine," Jack said bluntly. "That man has been making life hell for people in this town for months. About time someone took him down." They spent the next hour talking through what had happened and what they knew. Charlie listened carefully, asking questions about the layout of Whitmore's saloon and who had been there that night. When Hannah described Thomas Garrett, Charlie's expression tightened. "I knew him," he said quietly. "Met him last week up at the Silver Bell. He was a decent man, looking to make a new start. Talked about bringing his family out here once he had enough saved." He looked at Hannah. "You are sure Whitmore murdered him in cold blood?" "I am certain," Hannah said firmly. There was no provocation, no real reason except that Samuel was losing and angry about it. Charlie nodded slowly. "Then we make sure he pays for it. Here is what I am thinking. We need to get Thomas's body before Whitmore disposes of it if he has not already. We need witnesses willing to talk, which means finding people Whitmore does not own. And we need to get word to the territorial marshal in Denver without Whitmore finding out." "The body will be the hardest part," Jack said. "Whitmore probably had his men dump it somewhere in the mountains." "Not if he is smart," Charlie countered. "Bodies have a way of being found in the mountains. Animals dig them up, prospectors stumble across them. If I were him, I would have thrown it in the old mine shaft out past Dead Horse Gulch. No one goes near that place anymore, and it is deep enough that nothing is coming back out." Mason looked at Hannah. "Did you see where they took him after they dragged him out back?" She shook her head. "I ran before I could see. But I heard Samuel tell his men to take care of it properly, which I assume meant making sure he would not be found." "Then Charlie is probably right about the mine shaft," Mason said. "Which means we need to get out there tonight, before Whitmore has time to do anything else." "That is a lot of darkness to cover," Jack warned. "And if Whitmore has men watching the roads—" "Then we do not take the roads," Charlie said. "I know a trail that goes through the high country. It will take longer, but we will not be seen." They made their plans quickly, dividing up responsibilities. Charlie would lead Mason out to the mine shaft to search for Thomas Garrett's body. Jack would stay behind to watch over Hannah and to keep an eye on Whitmore's movements in town. If they could find the body and get it to someone trustworthy, they would have real evidence to take to the territorial marshal. "What about me?" Hannah asked. I cannot just sit here and do nothing. You staying safe is not nothing, Mason said gently. If something happens to you, we lose our witness. You are the most important piece of this whole thing, Hannah. I need you to trust Jack to protect you while Charlie and I handle this part. She did not look happy about it, but she nodded. I trust you. Just promise me you will be careful. Both of you. Always am, Mason said, echoing Jack's words from earlier. He caught her hand briefly, squeezing it. We will be back before dawn. The ride out to Dead Horse Gulch took 3 hours through some of the roughest terrain in the San Juan Mountains. Charlie led the way, his horse picking through narrow trails and across rocky slopes that made Mason grateful for the moonlight. They did not speak much, both of them focused on the task ahead, and on watching for any sign they were being followed. The old mine shaft was exactly where Charlie said it would be. A dark hole in the side of a mountain surrounded by rotting timber and rusted equipment. The place had been abandoned for years after a cave-in killed half a dozen miners, and most people avoided it out of superstition if not common sense. If there is a body down there, we are going to have to go get it, Charlie said, studying the opening. Shaft is at least 40 feet deep. We brought rope, Mason said grimly. Let us hope we are not too late. They tied off the rope to a solid boulder and Mason went down first, lowering himself hand over hand into the darkness with a lantern hanging from his belt. The shaft was cold and damp, the walls slick with moisture, and the deeper he went the more the smell hit him. Death. Recent death. His boots hit something soft and yielding, and Mason had to swallow hard against the bile rising in his throat. He lifted the lantern and saw Thomas Garrett's body, already starting to bloat in the summer heat. The man had been shot in the chest, just like Hannah said, and there was no mistaking the wound for anything but murder. Found him, Mason called up to Charlie. Going to need help getting him out. It took both of them and nearly an hour of hard work, but they finally managed to haul Thomas Garrett's body out of the mine shaft and wrap it in canvas. Mason said a quiet prayer over the dead man, feeling the weight of what they were doing settle heavy on his shoulders. This was evidence, yes, but it was also a person, someone who had deserved better than to be shot down and thrown away like trash. Now what? Charlie asked quietly. Now we take him to Doc Harlow. He is honest and he is not in Whitmore's pocket. If anyone will examine the body and write up an official report, it is him. They rode hard back toward Telluride, pushing their horses as fast as they dared in the darkness. The sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky when they reached the doctor's house, a small cabin on the edge of town. Mason pounded on the door until a lamp flickered on inside and Doc Harlow appeared, rumpled and irritated. This better be good, Bryant. I was sleeping. It is not good. It is murder. Mason gestured to the canvas-wrapped body on Charlie's horse. Thomas Garrett. Shot last night by Samuel Whitmore over a card game. We need you to examine him and write up an official report, something we can take to the territorial marshal. Doc Harlow's irritation vanished, replaced by grim focus. Bring him inside, and tell me everything. By the time they finished explaining and the doctor had examined the body, the sun was fully up and Mason was exhausted. But Doc Harlow had given them exactly what they needed. A detailed report documenting the gunshot wound, the time of death, and his professional opinion that Thomas Garrett had been murdered. This should be enough to get the territorial marshal's attention, Doc Harlow said, handing Mason the sealed document. But you need to understand what you are walking into. Whitmore has friends in high places. Taking him down is not going to be easy, even with this evidence. I know, Mason said, but it is the right thing to do. That it is, the doctor agreed. You need anything else from me, you let me know. I am tired of watching men like Whitmore run roughshod over this town. Mason and Charlie left the doctor's house and headed back up into the mountains, both of them too tired to talk much. When they finally reached the camp, they found Jack pacing near the fire and Hannah sitting exactly where they had left her, her face drawn with worry. She stood up the moment she saw them, relief flooding her expression. "You are back. Did you find him?" "We did," Mason said quietly. "Thomas Garrett is with Doc Harlow now, and we have got an official report documenting the murder. That is the first step." "What is the next step?" Hannah asked. "I ride to Denver," Mason said. "Take the evidence to the territorial marshal and convince him to come back here and arrest Whitmore." "That will take days," Jack pointed out. "And the moment Whitmore realizes what we are doing, he is going to come after all of us. Especially Hannah." "Then we make sure he does not realize," Mason said. "Which means we need to be smart about this. Charlie, can you get Hannah somewhere safe?" "Somewhere Whitmore will not think to look for her," Charlie considered. "I have got a friend who runs a trading post up near our array. He owes me a favor, and it is remote enough that Whitmore would not find her there. It is a 2-day ride, but she would be safe." Hannah shook her head. "I am not running away again. I did that once and it did not solve anything." "This is not running away," Mason said gently, moving to stand in front of her. "This is being smart. If Whitmore gets his hands on you before the marshal arrives, everything we have done will be for nothing. You staying safe is not cowardice, Hannah. It is strategy." She looked up at him, and Mason saw the fear in her eyes warring with something else, something that looked like trust. "You promise you will come back, that you will not just leave me up there and forget about me." "I promise," Mason said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "When this is over, when Whitmore is behind bars and you are free, I will come find you. You have my word." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "Then I will go. But Mason, please be careful. I do not want to lose you when I have only just found you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning, and Mason felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "You are not going to lose me," he said quietly. "I am too stubborn to die, and I have got too much to live for now." They spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey. Charlie would take Hannah to our array, while Jack would stay in Telluride and keep an eye on Whitmore's movements. Mason would ride to Denver as fast as his horse could carry him, with the doctor's report and his own testimony about what Hannah had witnessed. As the sun started to set, Mason found himself alone with Hannah for a few minutes while the others saddled horses. She had changed into some clothes Charlie had brought from town, practical riding gear that fit her better than the ruined dress, and she looked younger somehow, more like the girl she must have been before Samuel Whitmore had entered her life. "I am scared," she admitted quietly. "Not just of Whitmore, but of what comes after. If we succeed, if he is arrested, I will be free, but I will still have nothing. No home, no family, no way to support myself." Mason reached out and took both her hands, holding them gently. "You will have friends," he said. "Jack and Charlie and me. And Hannah, I want you to know something. When this is over, if you want to stay in Colorado, I will help you however I can. Find you a place to live, help you get work, whatever you need. You do not have to face the future alone." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Mason took a breath, knowing he was about to say something he could not take back. "Because in the space of a day, you have become important to me, more important than anything has been in a long time. I know it is crazy, I know we barely know each other, but Hannah, when I look at you I see someone worth fighting for, someone worth." He trailed off, not quite ready to say the word love, but feeling it all the same. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of fear or grief. "I see the same thing when I look at you," she said softly. "Someone good and brave and real. Someone who makes me believe that maybe, just maybe, I can have the life I dreamed of after all. Mason pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and for a moment the danger and the uncertainty faded away, and there was only this: the warmth of her against him, the smell of her hair, the steady beat of her heart. "We are going to get through this," he promised. "All of it. Together." "Together," she echoed, and when she pulled back to look at him, Mason saw everything he had been searching for in her eyes. Charlie's voice broke the moment. "We need to ride if we are going to make good time." Mason reluctantly let Hannah go, but not before pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. "Stay safe. I will see you soon." "I will hold you to that," she said, and then Charlie was leading her away and Mason was left standing by the fire, watching her disappear into the gathering darkness. Jack came up beside him, clapping him on the shoulder. "You have got it bad, friend." "I know," Mason admitted. "Does not change what needs to be done, though. No, it does not, but it makes the stakes a hell of a lot higher." Jack's expression turned serious. "You watch your back in Denver, you hear? Whitmore might have connections there too, and if he gets word you are coming—" "I will be careful," Mason promised. "You just make sure nothing happens in Telluride while I am gone, if Whitmore makes a move." "I will handle it," Jack said firmly. "You just focus on getting that marshal back here before this whole thing blows up in our faces." Mason rode out within the hour, pushing his horse hard through the mountain passes toward Denver. The journey normally took 3 days, but Mason made it in 2, stopping only when absolutely necessary and catching a few hours of sleep in his saddle. The territorial marshal's office was in the center of Denver, a brick building that looked far more official than anything in Telluride. Marshal Henry Williams was a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes, and a reputation for honesty that had made him plenty of enemies over the years. He listened to Mason's story without interrupting, reading Doc Harlow's report with careful attention. "This is serious," he said finally. "If what you are telling me is true, Samuel Whitmore committed cold-blooded murder. But you understand that bringing charges against a man with his resources is not going to be simple. He will hire lawyers, he will pay off witnesses, and he will do everything in his power to make this go away." "I know," Mason said, "but we have got physical evidence and an eyewitness." "That has to count for something." "It does," Williams agreed. "Enough that I am willing to ride back to Telluride with you and make an arrest, but I need your witness to testify, and I need her to be credible. Whitmore will try to destroy her reputation, make her seem unreliable or vindictive." "Is she strong enough to withstand that?" Mason thought about Hannah, about the strength it had taken for her to run from Whitmore and to trust a stranger with her story. "She is stronger than she knows, and she will not be alone. She will have me." Williams studied him for a long moment. "You are personally involved with this woman." "I am," Mason said, meeting his gaze steadily. "And before you ask, no, that does not change the facts of the case. Whitmore murdered Thomas Garrett. My feelings for Hannah Porter do not alter that reality." "No, they do not," Williams agreed. "But they do complicate things. You understand that, right?" "I understand that justice should not depend on who has money or connections," Mason said flatly. "And I understand that if we do not stop Whitmore now, he will keep hurting people until someone finally does. I would rather it be us, doing things the right way, than some vigilante with a gun." Williams smiled slightly. "Fair enough. Give me an hour to get my things together and round up a couple of deputies. We will ride back to Telluride together." The ride back was slower with 4 men instead of 1, but Mason was grateful for the company. Marshal Williams was good company, sharing stories from his years in law enforcement and asking thoughtful questions about Telluride and the people who lived there. By the time they reached the mountains above the town, Mason felt confident he had made the right choice in trusting Williams to handle things properly. They rode into Telluride just after noon on the fourth day since Mason had left. The town was busy with the usual midday traffic, miners coming down from their shifts and merchants doing business in the streets. Mason led the marshals straight to Jack Freeman's livery, where they found Jack working on a wagon wheel. Jack looked up, relief crossing his face when he saw them. "About time you got back. Things have been tense around here." "What happened?" Mason asked sharply. "Whitmore knows something is up. He has been asking around about you, about where you went. And yesterday he sent some of his men out searching the mountains. I think he is looking for Hannah." "Good thing she is not here," Mason said. He turned to Williams. "This is Jack Freeman, the friend I told you about. Jack, this is Marshal Henry Williams and his deputies. They are here to arrest Whitmore." Williams stepped forward, shaking Jack's hand. "I am going to need statements from everyone involved before I make the arrest. That includes your witness. Where is she?" "Safe, up near our A," Mason said. "I can ride up and bring her back, but it will take 2 days." "Then we wait," Williams said. "I am not making an arrest this serious without having the witness here to back it up. In the meantime, I want to talk to Doc Harlow and anyone else who might have information about what happened that night." They spent the rest of the day gathering information. Doc Harlow gave his statement, as did 2 miners who had been at Whitmore's saloon the night of the murder, and were willing to testify that they had seen Whitmore shoot Thomas Garrett. It was not much, but combined with Hannah's eyewitness account and the physical evidence of the body, it was enough to build a case. That night, Mason stayed at the livery with Jack, both of them taking turns keeping watch in case Whitmore tried something. "You really care about this girl, don't you?" Jack asked during his shift. "I do," Mason admitted. "More than I thought possible in such a short time. She is. I do not know how to explain it, Jack. When I am with her, I feel like the man I was supposed to be before the war, before everything went to hell. She makes me want to be better." "That is love talking," Jack said with a grin. "And about damn time, too. You have been alone too long, Bryant." "Maybe," Mason allowed. "But first we have to get through this. If something happens to her because I brought her into this fight." "Nothing is going to happen to her," Jack said firmly. "We are not going to let it." At dawn, Mason saddled his horse and rode north toward Auray. The journey felt longer this time, every mile stretching out as he worried about what he would find when he arrived. But when he finally reached Charlie's friend's trading post, he found Hannah safe and looking better than she had when he had left her. She had color in her cheeks and had gained back some of the weight fear and stress had stolen, and when she saw him riding up, her face lit with a smile that made his heart stutter. "You came back," she said, running to meet him as he dismounted. "I promised I would," Mason said, catching her in his arms. "Hannah, I have got good news. The territorial marshal is in Telluride and he is ready to arrest Whitmore, but he needs you to come back and give your statement. Are you ready for that?" She pulled back to look at him, and he saw both fear and determination in her eyes. "I am ready. I want to see this through, Mason, for Thomas Garrett, for myself, and for anyone else Whitmore might hurt if he is not stopped." "Then let us go finish this," Mason said. They rode back to Telluride together, and this time Mason kept Hannah close, unwilling to let her out of his sight. They talked as they traveled, the conversation flowing easily now that the initial awkwardness had worn off. Hannah told him about her time at the trading post, about the books she had read and the plans she was starting to make for her future. Mason told her about Marshal Williams and the case they were building, about how strong their evidence was. What will happen after? Hannah asked as they made camp on the second night. "After Whitmore is arrested and tried, I mean. Where will I go?" Mason poked at the fire, choosing his words carefully. "I have been thinking about that. I have got some money saved up, enough to buy a small ranch if I wanted to. There is good land up in the valley north of Telluride, water rights and everything. I was thinking maybe I would settle down there, build something permanent for the first time in years." "That sounds nice," Hannah said softly. "Lonely, though, working a ranch by yourself." Mason looked up at her, his heart pounding. "It would be. Which is why I am hoping I would not be by myself. Hannah, I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but I want you to know that when I think about my future now, I see you in it. If you wanted to, if you felt the same way, I would be honored if you would consider staying with me, building a life together." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am asking if you would consider marrying me," Mason said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Not right away, not until you are ready and Whitmore is dealt with and you have had time to be sure. But someday, if you wanted to. I would spend every day trying to make you happy, Hannah. I swear that to you." She was quiet for so long that Mason started to worry he had misread everything, that he had rushed too fast and scared her away. But then she moved around the fire and took his face in her hands, looking at him with such tenderness it made his chest ache. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it. To the future, to the ranch, to you. Mason, you saved my life and then you gave me a reason to want to live it. How could I say anything but yes?" Mason kissed her then, gentle and careful, pouring everything he felt into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were shaking, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had just promised each other. "We should probably survive the next few days first," Hannah said with a shaky laugh. "Probably a good idea," Mason agreed. "But Hannah, no matter what happens, I want you to know that finding you by that creek was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing that ever happened to me was that you stopped when you heard me crying," Hannah replied. "That you cared enough to help a stranger." "You were never really a stranger," Mason said. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were going to change my life." They rode into Telluride the next afternoon, and Mason took Hannah straight to the hotel where Marshal Williams was staying. The marshal interviewed her for over an hour, writing down every detail of what she had witnessed the night Thomas Garrett was killed. Hannah's voice shook at times, especially when she described the actual shooting, but she never wavered in her testimony. When it was over, Williams closed his notebook and looked at them both seriously. "You have got a strong case here. With Doc Harlow's report, the physical evidence, and Miss Porter's testimony, I am confident we can get a conviction. But I need you both to understand that this is going to get ugly. Whitmore will fight back with everything he has got, and he will try to intimidate witnesses and discredit your testimony. Are you prepared for that?" "I am prepared to tell the truth," Hannah said firmly. "Whatever he does, whatever he says, that will not change what I saw." "Good," Williams said. "Then we will make the arrest tomorrow morning. I want to do it publicly, in front of witnesses, so there is no question about the charges or the process. Bryant, I am going to need you and your friends there for backup, just in case Whitmore's men try to interfere." "We will be there," Mason promised. That night, Mason stayed with Hannah at the hotel, both of them too keyed up to sleep much. They talked until late, making plans for the future and trying not to think too hard about what the next day would bring. When Hannah finally dozed off, Mason sat by the window and watched the street below, his gun in his lap and his mind running through all the ways things could go wrong. But when dawn came and Marshal Williams knocked on the door, Mason was ready. They walked together to Whitmore's saloon, where Williams had arranged to meet the man under the pretense of discussing a land deal. Jack and Charlie were already there, positioned strategically around the building, and Mason could see at least a dozen townspeople gathering to watch, drawn by the news that something big was about to happen. Samuel Whitmore came out of his saloon looking smug and confident, clearly expecting to buy off or intimidate yet another lawman. His expression changed when he saw the badge on Williams's chest and the deputies flanking him. "Samuel Whitmore," Williams said in a voice that carried across the street, "you are under arrest for the murder of Thomas Garrett. You have the right to legal representation, but you are coming with me now." Whitmore's face went red, then white. "This is ridiculous. I did not murder anyone. This is a setup, probably by that lying whore I was fool enough to try to help." His eyes found Hannah standing behind Mason, and his expression turned vicious. "You are going to regret this, girl. You and everyone who helped you." "The only one with regrets here is you," Mason said coldly, stepping forward. "You murdered a man in cold blood, Whitmore. Now you are going to face justice for it." Whitmore's hand moved toward his gun, but Williams was faster, drawing his own weapon and pointing it steadily at Whitmore's chest. "Do not do it. You are already looking at murder charges. You really want to add assaulting a federal officer to the list." For a long moment, the street was silent, everyone holding their breath. Then Whitmore's shoulders sagged and he raised his hands. "This is not over," he said as the deputies moved in to cuff him. "I've got lawyers, I've got friends. You will never make this stick." "We will see about that," Williams said. He nodded to Mason. "Get Miss Porter somewhere safe until the trial. I will send word when we need her." Mason did exactly that, taking Hannah back up to the mountains where they had first met. It felt right, somehow, to return to the place where everything had started, to wait there while the wheels of justice slowly turned in Telluride. The trial took place 3 weeks later, and it was every bit as ugly as Williams had warned. Whitmore's lawyers tried everything to discredit Hannah's testimony, painting her as a scorned woman seeking revenge. But Hannah held firm, answering every question with calm certainty. And when Doc Harlow and the other witnesses corroborated her story, the jury had no choice but to believe her. Samuel Whitmore was found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. Mason was there when the sentence was read, and he saw the moment Whitmore's arrogance finally crumbled, replaced by the cold realization that his money and connections could not save him this time. Afterward, Marshal Williams shook Mason's hand. "You did good work here, Bryant. You and your friends. This town is better off without men like Whitmore running things." "I just did what was right," Mason said. "Hannah is the brave one. She is the one who stood up and told the truth when it could have cost her everything." "She is a remarkable woman," Williams agreed. "You planning to marry her, if she will have me," Mason said. "Though I have not officially asked yet. Seemed wrong to do it while all this was still hanging over us." "Well, it is not hanging over you anymore," Williams pointed out. "Might want to get on that before she realizes she can do better." Mason laughed, the first real laugh he had managed in weeks. "Good advice, Marshal." He found Hannah waiting outside the courthouse, her face peaceful for the first time since he had met her. She smiled when she saw him, and Mason felt his heart skip. "It is over," she said wonderingly. "It is really over." "It is," Mason confirmed. "You are free, Hannah, free to go anywhere, do anything, be anyone you want to be." "I know exactly what I want to be," she said, taking his hand. "I want to be with you. I want to build that ranch you talked about, make a home, start a real life. If the offer is still open." "The offer will always be open," Mason said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring he had bought in Denver, back before the trial when he had been planning for a future he was not sure would happen. "Hannah Porter, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a broken-down cowboy who has more past than future, but who loves you more than he ever thought possible?" "Yes," Hannah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Mason slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her there in the street, not caring who saw or what they thought. When they finally pulled apart, Hannah was beaming, her face radiant with joy. "When?" she asked. "When do you want to get married?" "Tomorrow, if you want. Or next week, next month, whenever you are ready. I have waited this long to find you. I can wait a little longer to make it official." "Tomorrow," Hannah decided. "I do not want to wait any more. I want to start our life together now." They were married the next day in a simple ceremony at the church in Telluride, with Jack and Charlie standing as witnesses and half the town turning out to celebrate. Hannah wore a simple white dress that she had bought with money Mason had insisted she take, and Mason wore his best shirt and the clean pair of trousers he had been saving for a special occasion. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Mason kissed his bride, he felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for as long as he could remember. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but a person. Hannah was his home now, and he was hers. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, and for the first time in his life, Mason understood what it meant to truly give yourself to another person. Hannah was gentle and patient with him, understanding somehow that despite his rough exterior, he had never really let anyone get this close before. They learned each other slowly, carefully, mapping out the territory of this new intimacy with whispered words and tender touches. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Hannah curled against his chest, Mason said, "I love you. I know I should have said it before, but I love you, Hannah Bryant." "I love you too," she replied softly. "I think I have loved you since you found me crying by that creek and promised me my tears would end with you. You kept that promise, Mason. You gave me back my life." "We gave each other our lives," Mason corrected. "I was just existing before I met you, Hannah. Now I am actually living." They stayed in Telluride for another week, making arrangements to buy the land Mason had talked about and ordering supplies for the ranch they would build together. The people of the town treated them like heroes, grateful to be free of Samuel Whitmore's influence, and several miners even offered to help with the building when the time came. When they finally rode out to their new land, Hannah riding beside Mason with their supplies packed on a mule behind them, it felt like the beginning of something real and lasting. The valley was beautiful, green and lush, with a creek running through it and mountains rising on all sides. There was an old cabin already there, abandoned by some prospector years ago, and they decided to fix it up and live in it while they built the main house. "It is perfect," Hannah said, looking around with shining eyes. "Mason, it is absolutely perfect." "It will be even better once we get it fixed up," Mason said. "Might take a while, though. Building a ranch from scratch is hard work." "I am not afraid of hard work," Hannah said firmly, "and I am not afraid of taking my time. We have got the rest of our lives, after all." They spent that first summer working sunrise to sunset, repairing the cabin and clearing land for crops and livestock. Jack and Charlie came up to help when they could, and several of the miners from Telluride made good on their promise to lend a hand. Slowly, day by day, the ranch took shape, becoming something real and substantial. Hannah threw herself into the work with enthusiasm that surprised Mason at first, until he realized she was building more than just a ranch. She was building proof that she could survive, that she could create something meaningful out of the ashes of what Samuel Whitmore had tried to destroy. She planted a garden that flourished in the mountain soil, learned to cook on the wood stove in their cabin, and worked beside Mason mending fences and caring for the small herd of cattle they had bought. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their cabin and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about their plans and their dreams. Hannah wanted to start a small school eventually, to teach the children of the miners and ranchers who lived scattered through the valley. Mason wanted to breed horses, to create a line of mountain-tough animals that could handle the rough terrain. "We could do both," Hannah said one night, leaning against his shoulder. "There is room here for all kinds of dreams." "There is," Mason agreed, "and time. We have got all the time in the world." Their first winter in the mountains was hard, with snow piling up higher than Mason had ever seen and temperatures dropping low enough to freeze water in its bucket overnight. But they survived it together, keeping each other warm and entertained through the long, dark months. Hannah read aloud from books she had ordered from Denver, and Mason taught her to play poker and told her stories about his time in the war and the years he had spent drifting afterward. "Do you ever regret it?" Hannah asked one night as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside. "Meeting me, I mean. Getting involved in all that mess with Whitmore. Your life would have been simpler if you had just kept riding that day." "Simpler is not always better," Mason said, pulling her closer. "And no, I do not regret it, not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah. Everything I did, everything we went through, it was worth it to end up here with you." "I feel the same way," she said softly. "Even the hard parts, even the scary parts, it brought me to you, and that makes it all worthwhile." Spring came eventually, melting the snow and turning their valley green again. Hannah discovered she was pregnant in April, and the news filled them both with a joy so profound it almost hurt. They spent the summer preparing for the baby, with Hannah sewing tiny clothes and Mason building a cradle from pine, wood he cut and planed himself. Their son was born in October, during the first snow of the season, with Doc Harlow riding up from Telluride to help with the delivery. Mason paced outside for hours, nearly wearing a hole in their porch, until he finally heard the baby's cry and the doctor called him inside. Hannah looked exhausted but radiant, holding their son against her chest with tears streaming down her face. "We have a boy," she said wonderingly. "Mason, we have a son." Mason knelt beside the bed, looking at the tiny red-faced infant with awe. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Thomas," Hannah said quietly. "After Thomas Garrett, if it was not for him, for what happened to him, we might never have met. It seems right to honor his memory." "Thomas Bryant," Mason said, testing the name. "I like it, Tommy for short." "Tommy," Hannah agreed, smiling. "Welcome to the world, Tommy Bryant." Raising a baby in the mountains was challenging, but Mason and Hannah rose to meet it. Tommy was a good baby, healthy and curious, and he grew fast in the clean mountain air. By the time he was a year old, he was walking and getting into everything, exploring their cabin with the same adventurous spirit his father had. They had 2 more children over the next 5 years, a daughter they named Mary after Mason's sister, and another son they called James. The ranch grew along with their family, expanding to include more cattle, a string of horses that Mason was training, and Hannah's school, which she ran out of a building they constructed near the main road. Jack Freeman visited often, bringing news from Telluride and helping with the bigger jobs around the ranch. Charlie Stone married a Ute woman named Sarah and built a cabin on the far edge of their property, and the 2 families grew close, their children playing together and learning from each other. "You did good, Bryant," Jack said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play. "Built yourself a real life here. Hannah and the kids, the ranch, it is more than most men get." "I know," Mason said quietly. "There are still days I wake up and cannot believe this is real, that I get to have this. After everything I saw, everything I did during the war, I never thought I deserved something this good." "Maybe none of us deserve the good things we get," Jack said thoughtfully. "Maybe we just have to be smart enough to hold on to them when they come our way." "You were smart enough to stop when you heard Hannah crying that day. That is what made all the difference." I was smart enough to know that walking away from her would have been the biggest mistake of my life, Mason agreed. Everything else just followed from that one decision. Hannah came out onto the porch then, carrying glasses of lemonade for both of them. She had changed over the years, grown more confident and more at peace, but she was still as beautiful to Mason as she had been the day he found her by the creek. Maybe more so, because now he knew every part of her, every strength and vulnerability, every dream and fear. "What are you two talking about so seriously?" she asked, settling into the chair beside Mason. "Just how lucky I am," Mason said, reaching for her hand. "How finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me." "The second best thing," Hannah corrected with a smile, nodding toward where their children were playing. "Finding me was good. Building a family with me, that is even better." "Fair point," Mason conceded. He laced his fingers through hers, marveling as he always did at how perfectly they fit together. "Hannah Bryant, have I told you today that I love you?" "Not since this morning," she teased. "I was starting to wonder." "I love you," Mason said, serious now, "more every day. When I think about what my life would have been without you, it feels empty, pointless. You gave me purpose, Hannah. You gave me a reason to stop running and start living." "You gave me the same thing," Hannah said softly. "When you found me that day, when you said my tears would end with you, I thought it was just words. But you meant it, Mason. You really did end my tears and replace them with joy. Every single day I spend with you is a gift." Jack cleared his throat, looking away. "You two are going to make me get all sentimental, and I've got a reputation to maintain." They laughed, and the moment eased, but Mason kept holding Hannah's hand, kept feeling the steady beat of gratitude and love that had become as natural to him as breathing. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Tommy grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses as much as his father did. Mary was bright and curious, always asking questions and demanding stories. James was the wild one, constantly exploring and getting into scrapes that left Hannah exasperated, and Mason trying not to laugh. When Tommy turned 10, Mason taught him to ride the way his own father had taught him, patiently explaining the importance of communication between horse and rider. Hannah taught him to read and write, instilling in him a love of learning that would serve him well. Mary started helping in the school, showing a natural talent for teaching that made Hannah proud. James just wanted to explore every inch of the mountains, and Mason often took him on hunting trips, teaching him to track and survive in the wilderness. "They are growing up so fast," Hannah said one evening as they lay in bed. "It seems like just yesterday Tommy was a baby, and now he is almost as tall as I am." "Time moves fast when you are happy," Mason said. "Seems to crawl when you are miserable, but when life is good it just flies by." "Are you happy?" Hannah asked, though she must have known the answer. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Mason said honestly. "There are still hard days, still times when the past comes back to haunt me. But you and the kids, the ranch, the life we have built, it makes everything else bearable. More than bearable. It makes it all worthwhile." "Good," Hannah said, snuggling closer. "Because I plan on keeping you around for a long, long time, Mason Bryant. You are stuck with me." "Best kind of stuck there is," Mason said, kissing the top of her head. They celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch, inviting everyone they knew from the valley and from Telluride. Jack came with his new wife, a widow he had been courting for months. Charlie and Sarah brought their 4 children. Even Marshall Williams rode up from Denver, now retired but still keeping an eye on the territory he had served for so long. "You two have built something special here," Williams said, looking around at the ranch, at the house they had finally finished building after years of planning and work. It is good to see people survive hard times and come out the other side stronger. We had help, Hannah said, smiling at Mason. And we had each other. That made all the difference. That night, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Mason and Hannah walked out to the spot by the creek where he had first found her. It was peaceful there, with the water rushing over the rocks and the stars bright overhead. "Do you ever think about that night?" Mason asked. "About what would have happened if I had not stopped?" "Sometimes," Hannah admitted. "But then I remind myself that you did stop. You chose to help a stranger when you could have kept riding. That choice changed both our lives." "It was not really a choice," Mason said. "Not for me anyway. When I heard you crying, I knew I could not just leave. Something in me recognized something in you, even before we met, like we were meant to find each other." "I believe that," Hannah said. "I believe some things are meant to be, and we were one of them. All the pain, all the fear I went through with Whitmore, it brought me to this place at this time so I could meet you, and I would go through it all again if it meant ending up here with you." Mason pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Your tears did end with me that day," he said softly. "And I promise they will stay ended. For the rest of our lives, Hannah, I am going to make sure you have more reasons to smile than to cry." "You already have," she said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "You already have." They stayed by the creek for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, remembering the past and dreaming about the future. When they finally walked back to the house, hand in hand under the stars, Mason felt the kind of contentment that came from knowing exactly where he belonged. Their children grew and had children of their own. Tommy married a girl from Telluride and took over much of the ranch work, expanding the horse breeding operation into something truly special. Mary became a teacher like her mother, opening her own school in town and making a name for herself as an educator. James became a surveyor, mapping the mountains and valleys he had explored as a child. Mason and Hannah grew old together, their hair turning gray and their hands developing the aches and pains that came with a life of hard work. But they never lost the connection they had forged that day by the creek, the bond that had carried them through hard times and good ones alike. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Mason woke up early and found Hannah already awake beside him, watching the sunrise through their bedroom window. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, reaching for her hand. "About how lucky I am," she said softly. "About how different my life could have been if you had not found me that day. About how grateful I am for every single moment we have had together." "I am the lucky one," Mason insisted. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, Hannah. Maybe more. You gave me a reason to stop running, to put down roots, to believe in something good again." "We saved each other," Hannah said firmly. "That is what love does. It saves us from ourselves, from our fears, from the darkness that tries to pull us down." "You told me my tears would end with you, Mason, and they did. But what you gave me was so much more than that. You gave me a life worth living, a family to love, and 40 years of happiness I never thought I would have. And I would do it all again," Mason said. "Every hard moment, every challenge, every fight, all of it was worth it to have this, to have you." They sat together watching the sun rise over the mountains they had made their home, the land they had worked and loved and passed on to their children. The ranch was thriving, their family was healthy and happy, and the legacy they had built together would last for generations. Mason thought about the man he had been before he met Hannah, the lost soul drifting through life without purpose or direction. That man was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, someone better, someone who knew what it meant to love and be loved in return. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saying yes that day when I asked you to marry me. for taking a chance on a broken-down cowboy who did not know what he was doing but knew he wanted to do it with you. Thank you for stopping when you heard me crying, Hannah replied, for caring enough to help, for keeping your promise that my tears would end with you. You gave me everything, Mason, everything that matters. They kissed then, slow and sweet, a kiss that held 40 years of love and commitment and shared joy. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling, their eyes bright with the kind of happiness that only came from a life well lived. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming their valley and illuminating the ranch they had built together. Their grandchildren would arrive soon for the anniversary celebration, filling the house with noise and laughter. There would be food and music and stories shared, memories made and traditions honored. But for now, it was just the two of them, Mason and Hannah Bryant, the cowboy and the woman he had found weeping by the creek. They had both been lost once, both been broken in their own ways. But they had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found themselves. Their tears had ended together, just as Mason had promised. And in their place had grown something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every moment of struggle it had taken to achieve. They had built a life, a family, a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. And that, Mason thought as he held his wife's hand and watched the sun rise over their mountain home, was everything he had ever wanted, everything he had ever needed, everything that mattered in this world or the next. Their story had begun with tears and a promise, spoken by a creek in the Colorado mountains. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined that day, something richer and deeper and more meaningful than any dream. And now, 40 years later, sitting together in the home they had made and the life they had shared, Mason and Hannah knew without doubt that every tear, every struggle, every moment of fear and uncertainty had been worth it. Because their tears had ended together, and their joy had only just begun.